The story of Daniel LaPlante is one that lingers in the minds of anyone who hears it, an account of home invasion and murder so chilling that it blurs the line between reality and nightmare. Born in Townsend, Massachusetts in 1970, LaPlante was a deeply troubled boy, shaped by a life of severe abuse, emotional neglect, and mental instability. But what makes his story particularly haunting are the terrifying events that unfolded in 1986, when he infiltrated the home of the Andrews family, and the brutal murders he would later commit. As he grew into adolescence, LaPlante began engaging in increasingly bizarre behaviors. He would break into people's homes, not to steal, but to invade their personal space in an almost voyeuristic manner. He would move furniture around, rearrange items, and leave little signs that someone had been there, a ghostly and sinister mark that he had been watching. But no one could have known just how horrifying his actions would become when he fixated on the Andrews family. Annie Andrews was 15 when she first encountered LaPlante. Still grieving the recent death of her mother to cancer, Annie was emotionally vulnerable. One evening, she received a phone call from a boy who introduced himself as Danny. He sounded kind, sensitive, and seemed to empathize with Annie's loss. He told her he was a friend of a friend, and after talking on the phone for several days, Annie felt comforted by his kind words and the connection they seemed to share. They eventually arranged to meet in person. But when Annie opened the door, she was met not by the attractive, charming boy she had imagined, but by Daniel LaPlante, unkempt, disheveled, and far from what he had described himself as. Annie felt an immediate sense of unease and tried to end the date as quickly as possible. What she didn't realize was that LaPlante was not going to disappear from her life that easily. What happened next is recounted by Annie herself. "After the date, I thought that was it. He was creepy and I didn't want anything to do with him. But then weird things started happening around the house. My sister Jessica and I noticed small things at first, objects moving, pictures disappearing, and sounds at night like something tapping inside the walls. We thought it was just our imagination. But then one night we heard knocks on the walls, and we actually thought it was our mom's ghost. I know it sounds crazy, but when you're grieving, you look for any sign. We started asking questions and the knocks seemed to respond. What Annie and Jessica didn't know was that the knocks weren't coming from a spirit. They were coming from Daniel LaPlante, who had been secretly living inside their house. Unbeknownst to the Andrews family, LaPlante had discovered a hidden crawl space behind a cupboard in the walls of their home. He had been watching them, spying on them, and pretending to be the ghost they thought they were communicating with. It wasn't long before things escalated. One day, when the girls returned home from school, they were met with a terrifying sight. A message scrawled on the wall in what looked like blood. The message read, "I'm in your room. Come and find me." Horrified, they fled the house and called their father, who immediately called the police. Their father, Brian Andrews, later recounted his feelings when he saw the message. "I walked into the house, and it was like something out of a horror movie. The writing was on the wall. It wasn't blood, but it looked like it, and things were out of place. I didn't know what to think. The police came and they searched the whole house, but they didn't find anything. I tried to tell my daughters it was probably just a prank, but deep down, I knew something wasn't right. But the nightmare was far from over. Over the next few weeks, more messages appeared on the walls, more objects were moved or destroyed, and the feeling of being watched grew unbearable. The family became so frightened that they all began sleeping in the same room, convinced that someone, or something, was targeting them. Annie and Jessica even started talking to the spirit again, asking it questions and receiving responses in the form of knocks. The most terrifying moment came one night when the girls heard a series of loud bangs coming from the walls. They cautiously opened the door to their bedroom, and there, standing in front of them, was Daniel LaPlante. He was dressed in their mother's wedding gown, his face painted with makeup, and he was holding a hatchet. Annie described the moment with horror. "I will never forget what he looked like standing there. His eyes were wide, and he had this horrible smile on his face. He looked completely insane. He didn't say a word. He just stood there with the hatchet like he was waiting for us to do something. We screamed and ran as fast as we could out of the house. I thought for sure he was going to kill us. The girls managed to escape and ran to a neighbor's house, where they called the police. When officers arrived, they discovered the small crawl space LaPlante had been living in for weeks. Inside, they found food wrappers, clothes, and evidence that he had been spying on the family the entire time. LaPlante was arrested and charged with multiple counts of breaking and entering, as well as stalking. But this was not the end of Daniel LaPlante's reign of terror. After being released from juvenile detention, LaPlante committed an even more heinous crime. On December 1st, 1987, just a year after the Andrews ordeal, he broke into the home of the Gustafson family in the nearby town of Townsend. The Gustafsons were an ordinary, happy family. Priscilla, the mother, was 33 and pregnant with her third child. Her two children, Abigail, aged 7, and William, aged 5, were both at home when LaPlante entered. Andrew Gustafson, the father, recalls the horror of that day. I came home from work and the house was so quiet. I walked in and called for Priscilla and the kids, but no one answered. Then I went upstairs and I saw Priscilla lying there in a pool of blood. I knew instantly she was dead. Then I found Abigail and William. They were both drowned. My whole world ended that day. I still don't know how to live without them. LaPlante had shot Priscilla in the head, then drowned both Abigail and William in separate bathtubs. It was a crime so brutal and senseless that it shocked the entire town and made national headlines. LaPlante was apprehended shortly after the murders, hiding in a dumpster, and was charged with 3 counts of first-degree murder. During his trial, his behavior was chilling. Witnesses described him as emotionless, detached, and showing no remorse for the horrific crimes he had committed. He was convicted and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Though LaPlante's story may seem like something out of a horror movie, it is a tragic and terrifying reality. The trauma he inflicted on the Andrews family and the Gustafsons was profound, leaving them with scars that would never fully heal. To this day, LaPlante's name is spoken with a shudder in the towns of Townsend and Pepperell, a reminder of the real-life horror that can lurk behind even the most ordinary of walls. Daniel LaPlante's case remains one of the most bizarre and unsettling in the annals of true crime. His actions, living inside the walls of a home, masquerading as a ghost, and then brutally murdering an innocent family, are so horrific that they defy comprehension. For those who lived through it, however, it is a nightmare they will never be able to forget. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to click the subscribe button and turn on the notification bell. Until next time, stay cautious and remain vigilant.